While doing DoorDash, I pulled up to Chick-fil-A and saw my fiancée in the backseat with a guy pulling up his pants. I called her. She said, "Don't worry, I'm at my parents' house." Then I picked up her dad and drove him to the parking lot. When she saw us, My name is Caleb, and for months I believed my life was moving in a steady, predictable direction. I never chased drama, never looked for problems, and definitely never imagined that one of the most ordinary nights of my life would turn into something that twisted everything I thought I knew. I had picked up an extra DoorDash shift because wedding expenses had started stacking higher than I expected. Rena and I had a date set for the end of the year, and every time I looked at a vendor invoice, I felt a little push to work harder. I did not mind. The idea of building a life with her made everything feel worthwhile. That night, I was moving through deliveries without any real thoughts attached. The kind of mental autopilot people fall into when the route is familiar and the city feels half asleep. Chick-fil-A was my next stop. I had been there hundreds of times, and I knew exactly how long their dinner rush lasted. The lot was usually packed, but that night it felt strangely quiet. I pulled into the designated pickup lane, checked the order name, and prepared to text the customer. Then I saw something that did not register at first because my brain refused to process what my eyes were sending it. A silver sedan was parked along the side of the lot, angled slightly away from the main building. I had no reason to focus on it, but a movement in the back seat caught my eye. It looked like someone pulling clothing into place. I assumed two teenagers were messing around in a car, which was not exactly rare in that part of town. I almost turned away, but something about the posture and the hair color of the girl in the back seat pulled my attention right back. It looked like Rena. Not just similar. Identical hairstyle, identical jacket, identical posture. I squinted, leaning forward slightly, trying to convince myself I was seeing someone else. The door cracked open, and the interior light flipped on for a single second. That was all I needed for the truth to land, like someone had dropped a concrete block on my chest. It was her. She was in the back seat of a stranger's car, and the guy with her was pulling up his pants like he had just finished something he should not have been doing with anyone's fiancée. My first reaction was disbelief. It washed over me in a strange, heavy way that made everything around me feel muted. Then confusion came sharply behind it. Why here? Why tonight? Why this way? I stared at the scene for a few seconds too long before instinct pushed me to grab my phone. I called her because a part of me still held on to the hope that there was some explanation, even if logic had already thrown that idea in the trash. Her voice came through calm, relaxed, and completely unaware of what I was staring at. She said she was spending time at her parents' house because she needed a quiet evening. She said she was sitting in the living room. She said she was resting and that everything was fine. Every sentence she delivered made the betrayal worse because she had no hesitation in lying. It flowed out of her as if the truth had no weight. I kept my voice steady and pretended to believe her. I told her I would swing by to bring something her mother had asked for earlier in the day. She agreed without any resistance. That told me everything. If she had been at home, she would have said no because her mother had not actually asked me for anything. Rena did not even catch that detail. She simply needed a lie and used the first one that came to mind. I hung up, forced myself to breathe evenly, and drove out of the lot without confronting her. If I stayed even a second longer, I knew I would either freeze or explode, and neither option would help reveal the full truth. Her parents lived 15 minutes away in a quiet, older neighborhood. During the drive, I replayed the moment in the parking lot over and over again. I tried to imagine some alternative scenario that would soften the blow, but every road in my mind led back to the same brutal conclusion. Rena was cheating. Not emotionally. Not vaguely. Physically. The kind of betrayal that leaves no room for misinterpretation. I pulled up to the house and knocked on the door. Her father, Patrick, answered. He looked surprised to see me at that hour. I asked if Rena was inside. His forehead tightened slightly as he said he thought she was with me because she had mentioned running errands with me earlier. That was the second lie from her, layered perfectly over the first. I took a moment to steady my voice and told him that we needed to drive somewhere together. I said it was important. Patrick had always been a straightforward man who never wasted time on unnecessary questions. He looked at my face for a moment and must have sensed something was wrong because he grabbed his jacket and followed me to the car without pressing for more information. As soon as he sat down, he asked where we were going. I told him he would understand when we arrived. The drive back to Chick-fil-A felt heavy. Patrick kept glancing at me, trying to piece together my silence. When we pulled into the lot, I parked at an angle that gave us a clear view of the silver sedan. It was still there. The interior lights were off, but the engine was running. Patrick leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. He recognized his daughter instantly. The moment he understood what he was looking at, his entire expression changed. It was not rage or shock, but a kind of cold disbelief that cut deeper than anything I had felt that night. He opened the door and stepped out without speaking. I followed him. We stood there in the glow of the parking lot lights like two men who had just walked into a scene that would permanently change their families. Rena opened the car door on the opposite side. The stranger was adjusting his clothes again, apparently getting ready to leave. Rena stepped out first, smoothing her dress, laughing at something the man said. Then she turned her head and saw us standing there. Her laughter stopped instantly. Her entire body froze as if someone had slammed an invisible wall into her. She stared at her father first, then at me, and then back at the man behind her. Every possible excuse died in her throat at once. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply stood there caught between her lie and the truth that had just dragged itself into the open. And that was how the night truly began. Rena's silence in that parking lot did not last long. Shock held her for a few seconds, but panic moved in fast and twisted her expression into something desperate and unstable. She stepped toward us, shifting her weight between her feet like she was preparing to switch stories mid-sentence. The stranger behind her tried to close the door quietly, hoping no one would ask him who he was. Patrick's eyes locked onto his daughter first, then onto the man, and the disappointment on his face hit harder than anger could have. He raised his hand slightly, telling her to stay still. She started talking anyway. Every sentence fell out too quickly, jumping from apology to denial to justification. None of it matched what we had witnessed. She kept insisting she had not planned anything. She kept saying she had only wanted fresh air. She kept throwing disconnected explanations into the air as if one of them would magically convince us. The man behind her attempted to slip along the passenger side of the car, but I stepped into his path before he could get away. I did not touch him. I just blocked the route. He froze. The smell of sweat and cheap cologne clung to him. Patrick demanded to know how long this had been going on. Rena stammered something about a misunderstanding. She could not maintain eye contact with either of us. Her hands shook as she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same nervous gesture she used whenever she was caught lying about something small. This was not small. Patrick's voice dropped into a firm tone that I had heard only once before, years earlier, when a relative attempted to borrow money from him under false pretenses. He demanded clarity, and this time Rena provided nothing but fragmented excuses. The stranger tried to push past me. His face turned red as he reached for the handle. In his panic, he dropped his wallet onto the pavement. It hit the ground with a dull slap, and he froze again. I bent down, picked it up, and held it out. He did not take it. He mumbled something about not wanting trouble, and then ran across the parking lot as fast as he could. It looked cowardly, but it gave us confirmation. He was exactly the type of man who would sleep with someone else's fiancée and flee without taking responsibility. Rena called after him, which made the situation worse. She looked like someone who had been abandoned by the only ally she thought she had. Patrick took the wallet from my hand and opened it. The first thing we saw was a hotel key card tucked into the clear sleeve. The second thing was a driver's license with a last name we did not recognize. He flipped through the compartments and found 2 more key cards from different hotels. He closed the wallet with a slow inhale, as if bracing himself before the final blow. When he looked at his daughter again, his expression changed from disbelief to resignation. He said we were going home. He did not give her a choice. He did not yell. He simply turned and walked to my car as if the decision had been made the moment he saw the hotel card. Rena followed behind him, still trying to form sentences that would untangle the mess. When she climbed into the back seat, she looked small in a way I had never seen before. Her voice kept rising and falling, searching for an angle that would make either of us slow down. The drive to her parents' house felt unbearably heavy. Patrick stared forward, gripping the passenger door handle like he needed something to steady himself. Rena kept trying to speak from the back seat, but every time she started, Patrick told her to wait until they were inside. She grew more frantic with each passing minute. She kept insisting everything was not what it looked like. She kept saying she felt pressured. She kept saying she had been confused about the relationship. When we reached the house, Patrick stepped out first and told her to follow him. She hesitated for a moment before obeying. I stayed near the door, unsure whether stepping inside would worsen the situation. Patrick motioned for me to come in, so I followed. The living room lights were still on. Rena's mother, Helen, stepped out from the hallway with a warm expression that disappeared the moment she saw Rena's face. Patrick explained what he had witnessed with slow, measured words. Nothing theatrical, nothing exaggerated, just the plain truth. Helen covered her mouth with her hand. The room seemed to shrink around us. Rena tried to defend herself, but her mother's shock turned into a different kind of disappointment. Helen asked if this was the first time. Rena said yes. Patrick lifted the wallet and repeated that the man had multiple hotel cards. Rena froze again. Silence filled the space between all of us. Helen demanded to see Rena's bag. Rena refused, but Patrick insisted. Eventually, she handed it over. Helen opened the front pocket and found old receipts from restaurants, rideshare trips, and a hotel bar tab dated weeks earlier. She flipped through each one slowly. The pattern became painfully clear. This was not a sudden lapse. It was not a one-time mistake. It had been going on behind our backs for longer than any of us wanted to accept. Rena attempted to blame stress. She claimed the pressure of the upcoming wedding had pushed her into making reckless choices. She tried to imply I had not been supportive enough. Her mother cut her off. Helen had always been gentle with her daughter, but that night, she spoke in a tone that made Rena stop mid-breath. She said cheating was not something people chose because of stress. She said lying repeatedly required conscious decisions. She said the betrayal had spread beyond me because the entire family had believed in her. Patrick told her to pack a bag and leave for the night. He said the house was no longer a place where she could hide behind excuses. Rena stared at him as if she could not believe he would say something like that. She tried to argue. She tried to say she needed time to explain. She tried to claim this was not fair. Patrick did not move from his stance. He repeated that she needed to go. Helen backed him up. Rena stormed toward the hallway, shaking and out of breath. She moved around the house collecting clothing, muttering fragments of explanations that did not make sense. She slammed drawers. She dropped things on the floor. She moved with the restless energy of someone who could not control the consequences anymore. Patrick stepped toward me and apologized. He said none of this should have happened. He said I did not deserve the situation. I told them I would head out so they could handle her. He insisted I take the wallet with me. He said the truth inside it did not belong in their home. I left the house and sat in my car for a long time. The lot was quiet. The air was cool. I stared at the hotel key card, tracing the room number with my thumb. I felt a pull to understand everything. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. I started the engine and drove toward the address printed on the key card sleeve. I did not know it yet, but the night was only preparing its next blow. The drive to the hotel felt unreal in a way that made the city around me look different. Streetlights seemed colder. Traffic sounded distant. My focus narrowed to the hotel address printed on the card sleeve I held between my fingers. I did not know what I expected to find, but the pull toward the truth was stronger than anything else in me that night. I needed answers because the betrayal did not end at the parking lot or in Rena's parents' home. It spread outward like something that refused to stop growing. When I stepped into the hotel lobby, the place felt too familiar in a way that made my stomach sink. Rena and I had walked through the same doors on our anniversary 2 years earlier. We had celebrated with cheap champagne and a view of the highway because it was all we could afford. That memory felt contaminated now. The receptionist behind the counter gave me a polite greeting. I explained that I had found a room, key belonging to someone who might have left it behind. I kept the story simple. I handed over the key and waited. She scanned it and looked up immediately. Recognition flashed across her face. She said the guest had visited frequently during the past month. I asked if she remembered the woman he usually came with because I needed to know for sure. She nodded without hesitation and said she recognized the same woman from earlier visits. Her description matched Rena exactly. That moment hit harder than the sight in the parking lot. Seeing something once could be an accident. Knowing it had been repeated at least 5 or 6 times carved a deeper wound than I expected. I thanked the receptionist and walked out of the hotel with a sense of finality settling into me. The truth had reached a level that could not be twisted anymore. Back in the car, I flipped open the stranger's wallet again. His license displayed the name Tristan Hale, an address across town, and a ring mark visible on his left hand in the photograph. I realized what that implied and felt a cold certainty forming. If he was married, his wife had no idea about what her husband was doing. I hesitated before searching his name online, but curiosity and justice pushed me forward. I found his social media within minutes. Every photo painted a picture of a man who lived a double life. He had a wife named Marina and a young daughter who looked no older than 5. Their family looked warm and stable in a way that contradicted the chaos I had witnessed. I sat in the car staring at the screen for a long time. Contacting her felt like crossing a line, yet the idea of staying silent weighed on me more heavily. She deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. After 10 minutes of internal conflict, I typed a message and sent it. I braced myself for anger or disbelief or denial. Her response came quickly and carried a tone that hit even deeper than shock. She asked if I could clarify. I explained what had happened without exaggeration. She called me within seconds. There was no hesitation. Her voice shook, but she remained composed enough to ask for details. She asked where it happened. She asked what her husband looked like. She asked if Rena had acknowledged anything. I answered everything as clearly as I could. When I read the hotel address aloud, she went quiet. She had suspected something for weeks, but her husband had insisted he was working overtime. She asked to meet. I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. She arrived wrapped in a heavy coat, her face pale and rigid. She placed her phone on the table and opened a message thread that made my stomach turn. Tristan had sent her affectionate messages only hours before the parking lot incident. He told her he was exhausted from extra shifts. He told her he missed her. He told her he would take a day off soon. She scrolled through the thread until she reached a screenshot he had saved. It was a photo of Rena's number with a different name added above it. He had changed her contact information to something generic so his wife would not notice. The level of planning stunned me. It meant their involvement was not impulsive. It had structure. It had repeated patterns. It had been sustained and intentional. We continued comparing details. The timeline matched everything she feared. Tristan had been disappearing on weekends. He had been leaving early for work. He had been coming home late. Everything lined up too perfectly. At one point she excused herself and stepped outside for a moment. I watched her from the table as she leaned against her car with both hands covering her face. When she returned, she asked if she could send me something. She forwarded a short video clip taken from her home security camera on a weekend when her husband had claimed to be leaving early for a contractor job. The footage showed Tristan walking out the door with a suitcase and a smirk, but the most painful part came 5 seconds later when Rena appeared behind him. She walked down the driveway with him, laughing casually, as if they were a real couple heading out on a trip. I felt something in me snap. Betrayal from one person is devastating, but betrayal shared between two people who had built their lives so carefully carries an entirely different weight. At the same time all of this unfolded, my phone kept vibrating. Rena had sent dozens of messages. She had called repeatedly. She had left long voicemails where her voice moved between begging, bargaining, and blaming. I did not listen to them. I did not answer anything. I turned the phone face down on the table and continued speaking with Marina. She asked what my next steps were. I told her honestly that I was piecing things together moment by moment. She nodded, saying she planned to confront Tristan when he returned home. She thanked me for telling her. She said she would not forget this. After we left the cafe, I sat in my car for a long time. I opened my phone and went through everything tied to the wedding. Checking my shared email with Rena felt like peeling off bandages glued to open skin. I found deposits she had placed on her own without telling me, including a secondary venue contract I had never seen before. She had used my card for several of the payments. The more I scrolled, the clearer it became. She had been setting up her future while using me as a financial cushion. My chest tightened as I read each document. She had booked fitting appointments on days she claimed to be visiting her mother. She had ordered decor through a vendor in advance using my information. She had created a separate guest list tied to the second venue. I could not understand what she planned to do with it, but the intention clearly sat outside anything we had previously discussed. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Rena. I ignored it and kept working. I compiled a folder of every document she had touched without permission. I added screenshots from the hotel. I added the messages from Marina. I added the receipts found in Rena's bag. I was building a timeline because I needed clarity. When I finally looked up from the screen, hours had passed. The night felt heavier. The air felt colder. I realized the story was no longer just about a cheating fiancé. It was about a pattern that dragged multiple people into the same storm. And the storm had only started. I stayed in the car for almost an hour before deciding what to do next. The folder I had built in my phone felt heavier than anything I had carried in years. Every screenshot, every receipt, every piece of evidence pulled the situation into sharper focus. It was not chaos anymore. It was a timeline, a pattern, a structure Rena had been building behind my back while pretending to build a future with me. The betrayal had roots and branches, and I still had not confronted her directly. When I drove home, the apartment felt different. The air felt stale. Her things still sat where she left them. Her shoes lined up neatly by the door. Her sweater draped over the couch. For a moment, I felt the strange dissonance of living with someone who had become a stranger without changing her physical surroundings. I gathered my essentials, documents, keys, and the few things I needed for the next few days, and packed a small bag. I placed her belongings on one side of the couch, creating a visual divide because I needed the separation. Before leaving, I opened her message thread for the first time that night. Dozens of messages stacked on top of each other in frantic bursts. Some sounded panicked. Some sounded pleading. Some sounded angry. She asked where I was. She claimed she needed to talk. She insisted I had misunderstood. The contradictions in her messages matched the contradictions she had thrown in the parking lot. Everything pointed to the same truth. She was trying to outrun her own decisions. I turned off my notifications and locked the apartment behind me. I spent the night at a friend's spare room, but sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene with her father standing beside me in that parking lot. That image sat like a bruise in my mind. Early the next morning, Patrick called. His voice sounded drained, like he had aged overnight. He said Rena had tried twisting the story to make herself look like the victim when she returned home after packing a bag. He said she claimed I had misunderstood everything. He said she tried throwing partial truths and emotional manipulation at both of her parents. It did not work. Helen had confronted her with the receipts she found in her bag, and Rena had eventually broken down under the pressure. Patrick said he wanted everyone to hear the actual facts, not the distorted version Rena had already started telling extended relatives. He asked if we could meet later so he could hear everything from my perspective. I agreed. Before ending the call, he apologized again. The weight in his voice felt heavier than the night before. I spent the morning organizing the evidence into a cleaner format. I labeled each screenshot. I arranged the hotel card photos. I included the timeline from the security footage Marina had given me. It felt clinical, but necessary. By the time I finished, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When it stopped ringing, I saw the transcript. Rena had filed a complaint against me. The message read like something ripped from a script meant to generate instant sympathy. She claimed I had confronted her aggressively. She claimed I had threatened her. She claimed she felt unsafe. And she claimed I had tried to block her from leaving the parking lot. She had twisted the truth so violently that I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. She had turned her guilt into an accusation. I called Patrick and told him immediately. He did not hesitate. He said we needed to go to the police station together. I met him there an hour later. He brought the wallet. He brought Helen. I brought everything else. At the station, the officer listened to both sides patiently. Rena had filed her statement earlier that morning. The officer asked for my version and then asked if anyone had evidence. I handed over the folder. Patrick provided his eyewitness account. Helen provided the receipts. Marina sent a signed statement with her own evidence, including the hotel footage. It became clear within minutes that Rena's claim did not hold. The officer called her in for questioning later that day. The report concluded she had filed a false claim. The weight lifted from my shoulders instantly, but the consequences for her began right there. A formal warning went into her record, and although she avoided legal charges due to the officer's discretion, the mark remained. That alone would be enough to complicate things for her job, her family, and her future relationships. After we left the station, Patrick asked if I wanted to confront extended family accusations before more stories started circulating. He said he was ready to speak clearly and firmly. We met with his relatives that evening in a quiet living room. Rena was not invited. Patrick laid everything out without anger, but with clarity that silenced the room. Once he finished, I showed the folder. People exchanged glances that carried a mix of disappointment and shock. Her aunt shook her head. Her uncle stared at the floor. No one defended her. The truth had pushed the excuses out of the room. The next few days unfolded like a slow collapse. Tristan's wife filed for separation immediately. She requested temporary custody. She informed his workplace of the fraudulent overtime claims he had made. He ended up suspended pending an investigation. His entire life unraveled before he even had a chance to rebuild a lie that would protect him. Rena lost the support of her own parents. Not permanently. Parents rarely sever ties forever, but enough to force her into a new reality. She stayed with a distant cousin for a few nights before moving into a small rental she could barely afford. Her job discovered the police incident because she had attempted to use it as justification for missing a shift. They requested documentation. When they saw the officer's notes, they issued a disciplinary warning. She was no longer the dependable employee she had pretended to be. I canceled the wedding entirely. The vendors required official cancellation requests. Some returned partial deposits. Others required the person who made the unauthorized charges to be responsible for reimbursement. Since Rena had made those charges with my card, she became the financial party liable once I filed a dispute supported by all the evidence. Her credit took the hit. Mine recovered fully. She had to negotiate payment plans on her own. I moved out of the apartment we had chosen together and into a new one closer to work. I blocked her number permanently. Her father thanked me for not engaging with her outbursts. He said she needed to confront the consequences she had created. He helped me move boxes. His presence offered an unexpected calm. Months later, Patrick called with news. He had learned through a relative that Rena was trying to rebuild her life quietly. She had kept her job, but she was no longer trusted with certain responsibilities. She had avoided dating since the fallout. She had withdrawn from social circles that once centered around her. She had been forced to sit with the damage she caused. As for me, things stabilized. I got a promotion at work after taking on a new project. I grew close to coworkers I had barely spoken to before. I started rebuilding routines without the weight of betrayal leaning on my shoulder. The past still followed me, but it no longer controlled anything. The betrayal changed every person involved. It dismantled illusions. It exposed intentions. It forced accountability. There was nothing dramatic or sensational about the ending. It unfolded the way real consequences unfold, slowly, steadily, and without shortcuts. Rena lost her relationship, her financial stability, her family's trust, her reputation, and her control over the narrative she had tried to twist. Tristan lost his home, his marriage, his financial safety, and the trust of people who had believed in him. I lost the illusion of who I thought I was marrying, but I gained clarity, stability, and a clean break. Some stories do not end with explosions. They end with truth, carving out space that lies cannot fill. This was one of them.